Hello and welcome to this 17th episode of Living Off the Grid in the City. This is your host, again, Hector Vladimir, and today I'd like to speak to you about batteries, the all-important batteries for those persons wanting to get off the grid. That will be perhaps your only method of energy storage and the technology that will allow you to use energy when there is little or no energy to draw from alternative sources. I will discuss a few topics today about batteries. First one being what batteries are. I will briefly go over the basics. I'm not going to delve too much into the details and intricacies of how batteries work, but I will describe how batteries produce energy and can collect energy in basic terms, in layman terms. So I will discuss both how batteries work and what batteries are to begin with. I will also discuss some of the systems used to charge batteries and to put batteries to work, basically. That is the fourth topic I will discuss today, is why batteries are needed to get off the grid. If you want electric energy, in basic terms, you will need batteries if you are planning to get off the grid. That is just plain and simple. Batteries are a necessity if you are willing to get off the grid and attempt to keep using electrical technologies, which are basically what make up modern civilization. A lot of it is made up by electrical devices. I will also discuss the types of batteries that are used to help anyone get off the grid and to keep anyone off the grid for that matter. There are various types of batteries in power rating, cost, size, description, you name it. Another topic I would like to discuss is the all-important battery wiring for off-the-grid systems and alternative energy systems. And lastly but not least, I will discuss battery maintenance, some of the intricacies of handling, using, and maintaining batteries, keeping them healthy, keeping them
in working order,
so you can use batteries as long as they can possibly work for you. So without any more delays, I will jump into the first topic of what are batteries. Many of us, most of us perhaps, have been exposed to battery technologies in some sort of way, whether it's your handheld device needing batteries and you can purchase those, replace those yourself. Maybe you have been exposed to your vehicle's battery or car battery, the 12 volts battery that most vehicles use. Maybe you have changed one before, purchased one, put one in, or had someone put one in for you. Maybe you've had to jump start your vehicle by using jumper cables connected to your battery. So most
rechargeable, lead acid, or flooded
batteries are, in fact, the same, similar technology.
Many of them
share similar parts and
many of them
share the same basic principle that goes back to the 1800s, perhaps earlier than that, late 1700s. Benjamin Franklin is said to have experimented with batteries, light technologies, but the person that's accredited with the discovery of the battery and putting together actually a battery is a French scientist by the name of Alessandro Volta. He put a battery together, like I said, in the beginning of the 19th century, and he actually showed a prototype or working model to the Emperor Bonaparte.
A battery is an
electrochemical device
that can store
electrical energy and thus output it. It is a collection of elements, metals, that can collect
electric charge
or electrical potential. The battery converts chemical reactions directly into electrical potential. A battery is made up of two or more of what they call cells, battery cells, which are electrochemical materials, more conventionally stacked together. I say together, but do not touch physically, but they are linked
electrically,
as I'll explain a bit better later on in this discussion. Batteries can more conventionally have multiple cells, but can also be, especially now in modern times, a single cell, which I'll explain a bit later. Those modern batteries, which by the way are not too common Batteries can be wet or dry cell. Wet cells, as the name implies, involve some type of liquid
or semi-liquid,
what they call electrolyte, or liquid medium for the chemical reactions to be aided or augmented. All batteries have a cathode and an anode.
The
Cathode is the positively charged side of the battery, and the anode is the negatively charged side of the battery. Thus, the battery having, as you may have noticed, terminals, both positive and negative. All batteries share this common
feature.
So batteries can be rechargeable, such as lithium-ion or lead-acid batteries, or can be one-time use. For alternative energy
purposes,
you will probably want the rechargeable kind.
You may
decide to go with one-time use batteries for example, flashlights, lamps, table center lamps, LED lamps. You can also use them for radios, handheld devices. If you were planning to get off the grid and just not use your wall outlets, you can go that route, use DC devices, and use one-time non-rechargeable batteries. One-time batteries can be alkaline batteries, for example, AA's, AAA's, DC batteries, the ones that you usually see at the store. Fresh batteries are imbalanced in electrical potential, with one positive side, like I said earlier, and one negative side. Usually the unbalance is towards the positive side. When I say unbalanced, I mean electrical balance as far as electron charge.
Meaning there is a greater amount of electrons within the material in the positive side of the battery. Again, when the battery is fresh or fully charged.
Batteries, when they are good, when they are usable, they are unbalanced. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but a battery needs to have negative charge on one side of the battery itself, on one of the cells, more so than the other, so the electrons can flow from one cell to the other. And this is a natural phenomena that exists where things tend to look for balance if there is any kind of unbalance. For example, if you have two buckets, one full of water, one without the water, and you somehow pipe them together on the bottom, the water will
transfer
from the full bucket to the empty up until exactly they are both at the same water level. This is a phenomena that occurs with electricity, with fluids, with gases, you name it. A lot of things, perhaps all things, look for balance in the universe. Electricity not being an exception. So electrical potential always looks for balance.
And
in a battery there is an electrical imbalance. And the minute you connect or link the positive and negative
terminals,
the battery will
instantly
balance itself really quickly if it's a direct path.
Too quickly, in fact, explosively so. This is why you never want to directly link the positive and negative terminals in a battery.
For example, a wire going from negative to positive, as you may have experienced. This could be a dangerous situation, even a lethal situation, or if you put a direct path between positive and negative, since electron flow is very sudden and can cause things to heat up very quickly, red hot. So make sure you never ever
directly
put a wire between the positive and negative, especially in bigger batteries. There needs to be a resistance between the negative and positive, of course. This is usually your load. When you connect a load to a battery, the flow is much slower than if you connect just a plain wire from positive to negative. Batteries are unbalanced. They have more charge on one side. Thus, when you connect it to a load or electrical device, the battery begins to look for balance by allowing flow of electrons between the positive and negative through your load or electrical device. So potential differences naturally look to balance themselves. A path for balancing a battery is usually the load, but can be any
other
path, including yourself, including your finger, your hand, your body. So be careful when handling batteries. Make sure that you do not become that path of electron flow between the negative and positive.
There are various
ways of making sure that it doesn't happen, including wearing non-conductive gloves, using non-conductive tools when doing connections for batteries. And I will try to go into some of the safety aspects here in this show. It may be another show altogether.
rechargeable batteries, once used of all of its charge,
can be unbalanced or charged by reversing the current within them.
Again,
fresh batteries or good batteries are unbalanced. You use them, they become balanced.
Then,
when they are completely balanced, there is no electron flow. You cannot use them. The battery is no good. For one-time use batteries, if it's a repeat use batteries or rechargeable batteries, you can reverse the current within them by placing them in a charger, and you can accomplish an unbalanced state again, recharge the battery. Only if they are rechargeable, whether it's lithium ion or lead acid.
There are various other types of rechargeable batteries, including nickel cadmium or NiCad, nickel metal hydrate or NIM, lithium phosphate or LiFePO4, lithium ion polymer or LiPo, rechargeable alkaline, and nickel iron batteries.
You can recharge rechargeable batteries. Make sure you use the correct recharge device. Unless you are an expert, make sure you do not rig a device for recharging a battery. That could cause some safety issues, including explosion of a battery, which could release hazardous and noxious chemicals, some of which can end up in your eyes. So be very careful handling batteries, especially when recharging them. Batteries can be overcharged and can become unstable to the point of explosion. So also a topic to be covered in another show. How batteries work.
Specifically, flooded lead acid batteries.
Batteries basically convert chemical energy into electrical energy. A battery usually consists of at least two cells. Each cell is a 2-half cell. In other words, it has two sides. One half cell is the electrode, where negative ions or anions are to migrate. The other half cell is the electrode, where positive ions or cations are to migrate. So basically, a half cell has negative ions and another half cell has positive ions. Basically, both battery cells have these two sides. That's why you can stack them
in a Volta battery fashion.
A series of wafers stacked one on top of each other and in various ways electrically linked. During charge, negatively charged ions are added to the cathode half of the cell. The cathode is the positive side of the half cell. At the same time, electrons are removed from the anode or the
negative
half cell.
Again,
when a battery is being charged, negatively charged ions are added to the positive side of the battery half cell.
At the
same time, you add to one, you have to take away from the other. The battery is the only source of energy in the system. So if you add to one side, you take away from the other. Thus, charging the battery is basically having the battery on balance itself. So the two cells never touch each other, but are electrically bonded or linked through the electrolytes. The electrolyte is a medium, sometimes liquid, sometimes solid.
For example, in a
wet cell battery,
the
electrolyte is a liquid, usually battery acid or brine, that facilitates the electrical chemical reaction. And that's it for how batteries work in basic terms. There are various systems
that
batteries can be used in, especially alternative energy systems that will help you live off the grid. These systems are solar or photovoltaic systems. Those systems use batteries. Solar photovoltaic can be at least two ways. One way can be off the grid or battery based. The other way can be on grid
or grid tied or
dependent on the conventional power grid or your home's power company. Or it can be both. It could be part-time off the grid, part-time on grid. Also, you can do the same with wind turbine energy systems. It can also be used with the conventional grid system. Batteries can be used with your home's electric, as it is used back in the Caribbean a lot of times. A lot of power outages still happen there, and people just decide to charge their batteries when there is grid power and use their batteries when the grid power goes out during blackouts, brownouts, etc. Just to expand a little bit on the solar photovoltaic use for batteries. Batteries can be used with solar panels in your roof or in your yard for off-grid applications. Off-grid being that you're not connected to your conventional home power at all. You're totally dependent on battery power, and of course you have to have a way to recharge your batteries, and that's why you have, or you may use, solar panels or solar modules. Solar modules produce DC energy as long as there is insolation or sunlight exposure, and this energy can be directed to a solar battery charger, which can be connected to a battery, at least one battery, or a battery bank, which comprises of 2 or more batteries, with really not there being limits
on the maximum amount of batteries that you may have.
You can always add more.
Photovoltaic or solar modules
can be one of the best options to charge batteries and to use in off-the-grid applications because of its simplicity. There are no moving parts.
Also,
it's probably one of the cheapest and simplest ways of being able to get off the grid using batteries and solar panels. You can have one battery, but it's recommended to have a lot more than that. The more the merrier. The more batteries, the more power you'll be able to harness and use, perhaps share with neighbors, family. Batteries that are used for solar photovoltaic applications are usually absorbed glass mat batteries,
AGM,
which are a battery technology that can hold much more charge for longer periods, and they have less power drainage
as compared with flooded or lead acid batteries.
But batteries
used for off-grid energy storage
can be also just your regular deep cycle lead acid batteries or wet cell batteries that you can buy at the store readily. They can be car batteries, although not recommended, because car batteries, although you can charge them and use them, the discharge
limit is quite low, meaning that you can only discharge them to a very high percentage, for example to its 40% discharge level, thus being quite inefficient for off-grid applications.
Although you can increase that discharge time by adding more batteries, you're much better off if you buy or acquire deep cycle batteries, which are not much more than your regular car battery. Wind energy systems can also take advantage of batteries, use batteries to allow you to get off the grid, be off the grid, at least part-time. And more or less the same wiring is required as for solar. You have to wire the wind energy generator or turbine directly to a battery charger device, which in turn connects to the batteries themselves. Sometimes wind turbines have the chargers built in, so that way you only have to wire in the positive and negative to the battery straight from the wind turbine. But sometimes you have to have a battery charger in between. Battery chargers, all they do is control the charge going into the battery so that the battery is not overcharged, which is again a very dangerous situation at times and may cause the battery to explode or at the very least become unusable. You can also charge batteries or a battery bank using grid power, at least on a part-time basis. For example, many areas of the world experience power outages. You can use grid power to charge batteries for use during power outages, blackouts, brownouts, etc. If you're looking to get off the grid, I assume you're looking to get off your conventional power grid or power company. You're looking to disconnect from your power company. Grid-tied battery systems, although a necessity in many areas of the world, is something that I do not advocate for the purposes of this show, and I will not delve into the details of hooking up batteries to the grid, but in very lay terms, you need a battery charger that takes power from the grid, your regular outlet, and outputs recharging DC power to your battery system. When I speak of a battery system or battery bank, I'm talking about 2 or more batteries wired in a way that they can be used as one big battery, whether it be 12, 24, or 48 volts or more. They need to be wired in a way to where 2 or more batteries act as one. And you can go ahead and wire the battery bank to your either device or to your
DC to
AC inverter, so you can convert that DC energy to AC so that you can connect your devices to that inverter. Moving on to the next topic, why batteries are needed for living off the grid. And the first reason is batteries are needed to use the power when alternative energy is not available or is available only in limited amounts. For example, solar.
Of course, there's not always sun, including overnight and during overcast.
It's not sunny at all times. So if you can't produce energy from the sun at all times, you need an alternative way of using energy. And for that, you need to store energy in one way or another. The best way for most applications is the use of batteries, electrical energy batteries. If you have a solar energy system, you can charge the batteries during sunlight hours, and you can also use power during sunlight hours, but once the sunlight hours are over, you can use the energy stored within your batteries for any application needing that energy. Same thing with wind. There's not an unlimited amount of wind in most areas. Therefore, you can charge your battery system or bank when wind is available and use the electric energy out of your batteries when wind is not available. Same thing with grid power in some areas of the world, even here in the North American region. And same thing with other technologies, other sources which charge the batteries. Batteries are used to use power in excess of that available from alternative energies. Also, batteries are used if you need to collect energy and use more energy than is available at any one moment or time from your alternative energy source. For example, if you have a solar energy system and you cannot use more power than what is generated by that system at any one point, you need a battery system to collect the amount of energy that you will need. Another way to put that is, if you need to run 2000 watts for a short amount of time, for example for cooking, and you produce only 1000 watts, how will you get that appliance to run? You need a battery bank that can collect 2000 watt hours. Most likely it's going to be a battery bank, not a single battery, but many batteries put together. And you can have a 2000 watt hour battery bank and use your 2000 watt appliance. By having the battery bank connected to the appliance, in turn the battery bank being connected to the solar panels, so it can charge when sunlight is available. So you can use batteries to extend or expand your power in excess of that power available from your alternative energy source. Again, the bigger, the merrier. You can have a bigger battery bank system to have even more power. Keep in mind that it will take more of the alternative energy source to recharge a bigger battery bank. It is recommended about 100 watts per 12 volt, 100 amp hour battery, or you want 1 watt per 1 watt hour from your battery. Batteries again are rated per amp hour, so you can more or less calculate your watts for your battery depending on how many watt hours and how many volts the battery is rated for. For example, a 12 volt 100 amp hour battery, 12 volts DC and 100 amp hour is roughly 1000 watts. So in theory, not necessarily practical, you can run a 12 volt 100 amp hour battery for 100 hours if you draw only 1 amp per hour. Types of batteries used for off-the-grid applications. As I mentioned earlier, there are various types of batteries, but the ones that are mainly used to get off the grid are your rechargeable batteries, most commonly 12 volt batteries. You can go with one-time use, but that's gonna get expensive and very inconvenient very quickly. So I recommend you go with rechargeable, whether it be lithium ion batteries or just your regular lead acid, which are a bit cheaper, much cheaper actually.
There is an array of other types of rechargeable batteries, including nickel cadmium, nickel metal hydrate, lithium phosphate, lithium ion polymer, rechargeable alkaline, and nickel iron.
Most common batteries are your wet cell or lead acid batteries. You can get deep cycle batteries or marine batteries that can be relatively cheap and more readily available in most areas. Deep cycle batteries or marine batteries have thicker lead plates inside, and they allow for deeper discharge, thus longer use times. And you can also use them for longer, not only during each use, but they have long use life. They have also what they call AGM or absorbed glass matte batteries. They're better batteries for alternative energy applications. This is only because the absorbed glass within batteries are able to charge a lot better and discharge a lot slower, meaning that you can get more use out of the battery before having to be charged again.
In other words, the AGM battery discharge percentage is higher than that of the flooded lead acid battery.
And they also hold charge longer. Lead acid batteries do have self-discharge applicable to them. They do lose charge over time even if you have no load connected to them. So that's something to consider when thinking about buying or investing in batteries. Absorbed glass matte. It's a technology that's a bit more expensive, but it's well worth the investment because of their much better efficiencies. The common types of batteries are 12 volt, 24, and 48
volt DC.
12 volt
DC
being more common, but less apt for heavy duty or medium duty applications. Of course, the 24 and the 48
volt DC
being medium and heavy duty application batteries. If you're planning to run, for example, high consumption appliances such as water heaters, washers, dryers, any kind of air conditioning unit, you will probably want to go with 24 or 48
volt DC
battery systems or banks. And speaking of that leads us to battery wiring for 12, 24, and 48 volt. Battery wiring is just as important as getting the batteries in the first place. You will want to wire your batteries correctly so you can safely and efficiently use your battery in any kind of application, but especially in your alternative energy systems. Wiring 12 volt batteries is the most common and simplest. Most people are used to the 12 volt wiring, which is basically running the positive to positive, negative to negative.
This is a parallel connection, and it is to maintain the 12 volts and to expand your amp hours.
For the minimum of 2 batteries, you can run positive to positive, negative to negative.
A parallel connection.
And on one end, you can hook up a positive to the positive side of the load and the negative to the negative side of the load. And you have 12 volts battery bank. This applies to a battery bank of 2, 3, 4, and more batteries. You can just run or wire the batteries
in parallel.
Match the poles or the terminals, positive to positive, negative to negative in each battery. And at the end of the battery
bank,
run that to the load.
In other words,
the last battery on the battery
bank
is the one connected to the load, positive to positive, negative to negative. Make sure that you never ever close the loop on a battery bank. Never ever close the loop on a battery bank, meaning that you never ever connect the batteries in a circle. In other words,
never close the loop on the battery bank electrically.
Why? Because those batteries will attempt to very rapidly balance themselves, thus create a very dangerous high amperage situation where electrons flow at lightning fast speed, heating up
and likely burning
whatever wire or path happens to link the batteries in a loop.
This is sometimes called shorting the battery terminals.
You always want the end terminals to go to your load, never to one of the batteries connected to the system, always to the load. To hook up or wire 24 volt systems, you basically need at least 2 12 volt batteries. One pair of 12 volt batteries can make one big 24 volt battery. So no matter how many 12 volt batteries you have, to make a 24 volt battery bank, you're looking to make
or
link those
pairs of 12-volt batteries
together. In other words, you want to
interconnect in series only one
pair
of
12-volt batteries
to
make them into 24-volt batteries.
Then repeat this interconnection with other pairs of 12-volt batteries,
and that will give you your 24 volts battery bank. The way you make two 12-volt batteries into a 24-volt battery
is
simply by linking
one negative terminal and one positive terminal
together in one pair. This is very important. In one pair
only.
Otherwise, you run the risk of causing some electrical hazards. So pay very close attention. Again, you take a pair, link or wire
that pair
together,
one negative terminal and one positive terminal
on that pair
only,
from one battery to the other,
by using one positive terminal in one battery and one negative terminal in the other battery, and wire those two together, leaving one positive terminal open and one negative terminal open on each battery in that pair.
And that effectively gives you one 24-volt battery. Only if you measure the voltage at one open terminal from one battery, positive or negative, and the other open terminal from the other battery, which should be the opposite. If it's positive on one
battery,
it should be negative on the other battery. If you're measuring from the open positive, not the one linked together, the open positive on one battery, you measure it with your voltmeter to the open negative on the other battery, and that should measure 24 volts. And that
pair is
your one 24-volt battery. Now, to make a 24-volt battery bank with two or more 24-volt batteries, which of course is going to take you 4 12-volt batteries to make,
then you would have to wire those two 24-volt batteries in parallel.
To link two 24-volt batteries
in parallel
to make a 24-volt battery bank, all you need to do, once you wire the two pairs
to
make two 24-volt batteries as I just described, and just wire those two
in parallel
by wiring the open terminals
of that
24-volt battery
to the open terminals on the other 24-volt battery,
negative to negative and the other positive to positive. I highly recommend you look at the diagrams that I will provide here. You can also look those up online. There are various trusted sources where you can look those up. The same basic concept is used to make a 48-volt battery bank, and I will also be posting the diagrams for those. Battery maintenance. I will be discussing some of the disadvantages of batteries, some of the inherent cons that batteries have. You can use batteries safely and very efficiently and very productively if you maintain them. Batteries, no matter what type, do need some type of maintenance, some more than others. Lead acid batteries need much more maintenance, of course, than sealed batteries, whether it's lithium ion or absorbed glass mat. So you have to consider that when purchasing or investing in batteries. Batteries do self-discharge. They do lose charge over time, some more than others, up to 20% over a 1-year period. They do lose the ability to charge or recharge. So that's one thing you have to consider when using batteries. You will have to be replacing batteries at the very least every decade, and at the most as often as every couple of years. So depending on the technology, the type of battery that you use or have. So that's something to consider. Lead acid batteries, on the average, as far as my experience goes, last about maybe 3 to 4 years.
If kept outdoors or in a non-air conditioned environment.
That's deep cycle lead acid batteries, which are marine batteries, some of the batteries that you can buy at the store readily, and they're not super expensive as some of the other
renewable energy specialized
batteries. Batteries can corrode, especially the terminals. Even though they are lead, the connections that you may have on the terminals may corrode depending on the type you use. Of course, the non-corroding terminals are much more expensive. Non-corroding connections are much more expensive, so most people tend to go the cheapest way they can, and if that is so in your case, expect some corrosion. There are some things you can do, like add some of the anti-corrosion paste that they have at auto parts and other stores. You can add some of that to the terminals to aid or help with corrosion problems. I have tried this myself. There is some difference. It does help somewhat, but not a whole lot. There is still corrosion happening.
And I have learned since that this corrosion is actually mineral buildup, because the batteries are not allowed to charge fully before being discharged. Also, it is wise to tighten up the terminals with reasonable force.
Expect to have to clean battery terminals at least once every year if you have these type of connections that do corrode, especially if you have the battery bank outside, exposed to weather and temperature changes. Batteries can overcharge if your charging system is not working properly, if you do not use proper battery chargers, and even if you use them, they can fail. So you have to keep an eye on the charge of batteries, keep an eye on the actual charge of the battery, making sure that 12-volt batteries do not exceed much more than 12 volts, perhaps 14 volts, maybe 15. They could be charged through up to 15 volts, not much more than that. If you see a 12-volt battery hitting the 18-volt mark, you have a problem. So you may want to disconnect that battery ASAP and replace it.
And replace its charge controller.
Batteries can also over-discharge. You'll probably be more familiar with over-discharged batteries. If you have ever had to jump start your vehicle, that means your battery was over-discharged. If this happens often enough, and if it happens for long enough, a battery may go bad to the point where you cannot use the battery. So keep that in mind. Over discharge is a problem, especially with batteries that are not deep cycle. Deep cycle batteries are able to handle
over discharge
a lot more than your regular engine start batteries, but they do not have as much starting amps as your regular car batteries. That's something to consider. If you have to start a motor using a battery bank system, you may want to have enough amp power to kickstart that motor. You may want to consider truck batteries or even a battery bank of car batteries. Also, if you have batteries exposed to outside environments, even though they're not getting rained on, they may be exposed to temperature swings and changes. They may be exposed to moisture, to humidity, cold, heat, even if not directly. So batteries do last longer indoors, but they also, especially lead acid batteries, they also expel noxious gases, including
hydrogen and oxygen,
though in slow and very small amounts, but they in fact do discharge this flammable gas. So if you have a bunch of batteries enclosed in a sealed area, you can walk into an explosive environment. You may want to have that area ventilated, have a system to go ahead and prevent any kind of entrapment. Again, batteries that are exposed to the environment, to the elements out there, will last a lot less, especially those exposed to hot environments and wet environments. And to wrap it up, to summarize, we discussed what batteries are. We discussed how batteries were invented, who invented it, Alessandro Volta.
Batteries are a
compilation of electrochemical cells. They could be wet or dry cells. All batteries include a cathode and an anode, or positive or negative terminals.
They can be rechargeable,
such as lithium ion or lead acid, or they could be one-time use, such as alkaline. How batteries work in layman terms: batteries which are usable have an unbalanced state or unbalanced electrical potential.
Electrical potential differences
naturally look for balance in nature, so that's how batteries work. They are unbalanced, and they look for balance when connected to a load. They convert chemical energy to electrical energy. They consist of at least two cells. Each cell is a two-half cell, and negatively charged ions or anions are collected in one side of the battery, the positive side, and at the same time they are drained from the negative side, thus causing the battery to be unbalanced and ready to discharge, to look for that balance through your load, thus powering whatever load it is. Some of the systems that are used with battery banks Solar or photovoltaic systems are among the ones that use the most batteries. Wind energy systems also can use batteries. Grid-tied systems may also use batteries, especially in areas where power goes out often. Also, why batteries are needed for living off the grid. Most common reason is to use power when alternative energy
source cannot supply enough energy.
Another reason is to use power in excess of that available. And another reason is to gather and store energy for use when your grid power is
not available or too expensive.
Types of batteries used for off-grid applications. They must be rechargeable. They can be deep cycle or marine batteries. And the most common types of batteries used for solar applications are your
lithium-based batteries or
AGM or absorbed glass mat because of their ability to charge and discharge much more efficiently. And the common types of batteries are 12, 24, and 48 volt batteries, each one more capable of handling heavier duty applications. Battery wiring for 12, 24, and 48 volt battery banks. I highly encourage you to look at
National Electric Code approved
diagrams before you attempt to wire battery banks. Battery maintenance tips, how batteries do self-discharge, some of the corrosion issues with batteries, and the overcharging and over-discharging of batteries and how you can minimize that.
And lastly,
the environment may affect your battery performance. This has been episode 17 of Living Off the Grid in the City with your host here, Hector Vladimir. I hope you enjoyed today's show and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please look for the next episode soon, and please ensure to share this with your friends and family. And please like this content and subscribe as a sign of support and for me to continue to provide this type of content to more people like you. Lastly, if you wish to support this content further, please visit the links provided in this publication. Thank you.